All right, let's get this party started. So just wanted to first and foremost welcome everyone to BSides. It's certainly an honor and a pleasure to present to you today on a topic that is very much near and dear to my heart. So, before I introduce myself formally, if you think about, anytime you do a presentation on design, one of the hardest things is it has to look good, right? So there's a high bar that's already been set just given the actual topic itself, and the plan is to absolutely deliver. So my name is Devon Rollins. I am the Director of Cyber Threat Intelligence at Capital One. Interestingly enough, my education is by no stretch in design whatsoever. I just have an appreciation for the fact that all of what we see around us is actually decided by another human being. And I think if you can walk away from this talk with that appreciation in mind, you'll see too that the intelligence lifecycle and the products that we build in the intelligence community can be hugely beneficial, can be beneficiaries of that awareness. So, really what I think about in terms of my day-to-day work is, I'm a drawer of simple shapes. I can't do a lot with Photoshop or, a number of the other Adobe Creative Suite tools. So I am, pretty masterful, if I say so myself, with PowerPoint. I can kind of extend it to its fullest capabilities to do my biddings. And so I'm here to talk to you a little bit about how we apply that to cyber threat intelligence. So I've been in the cybersecurity field for roughly a decade. I started off in cyber investigative technologies, working complex cybercrime with federal law enforcement. Worked some really interesting cases and seen a number of that work show up in places that we read all the time. So I've seen, figures that I've created end up acquired, even though I never get credit for it. I've seen a number of the work really be push the envelope on how we look at policy in the spaces as it relates to digital crimes. But again, the interesting point here is the analysis, of course, has to, at minimum, qualify the interests of your stakeholders. But the truth of the matter is, it won't really get a seat at the table unless we put a lot of emphasis on how we package and push out that content. I've had I'd say the privilege of working in two countries, have done pretty significant stints over in the Netherlands, working on cases there, and then subsequently been all around, U.S. At a moment's notice, depending on what it is. And then I'd say, lastly, just talking to members of my team and just kind of working through the network, really talk to about 14 people, I say, about this very topic, because it's not one often addressed in cybersecurity. I think it's a fair assessment to say that the way we communicate is kind of an echo chamber. We generally are producing content for our peers, and if we want to get outside of that box, we need to be a bit more thoughtful in how we package that information. And quite frankly, the goal of cybersecurity, and that particularly of cyber threat intelligence, is to inform the business. And so never losing sight of that truth, we're going to do a lot of work and kind of walk you through some key takeaways, at least in my experience having run this program. So if you think about, cyber threat intelligence today, I'm going to start off from a different angle, of course, because this is a conversation about design. But there's 6 principles of design that really can enhance your work. And typically when we think about design, I don't want you to think about design from the perspective of adding. I want you to think about design from the perspective of producing. Reductionism. There's an exercise in that. And so if we think about the way we present information, that has to be balanced. We have to be overly concerned with the layout and proximity of information to each other, because if there's not enough white space, of course, it's a bit difficult for readers. Alignment, really important, really simple to change, really easy to do, but can do a lot to enhance those visual cues in your product, because of course you're trying to drive people's eyes and attention to certain content. Repetition. This is the easy way for which we can communicate volume, quantity, and so there's very small tricks there that we can apply. Contrast, so variations in color, do a lot to, of course, again, pinpoint where on a product or in a visual aid that we're producing, where we want to draw readers' attention. And then lastly, spacing. Can't deny spacing is very difficult. In a world of PowerPoint, people tend to fill it up with as much information as they possibly can. And we're here to kind of throw that on its head because a lot of our products are Word documents, right? So we're using PowerPoint to support the content that's written in narrative text, but spacing is going to be critically important to driving home those points. Again, we want people to make decisions, right? And I mean, I don't make light of that because decision making is the ultimate goal of cyber threat intelligence. And so when we think about what our purpose is to emphatically understand threats to the environment. Right, like, so I need a deeper understanding of the threat environment than anyone else in the organization. And quite frankly, being at a bank of our size, a technology organization that's really pushing the needle on how we do business with simplicity and integrity and with humanity at the heart and the core of what we do, threat actors want to take interest. There's no denying the fact that financially motivated threat actors are not going anywhere anytime soon. And so I take it upon, myself and my team and all the partners that we work with, our job is to know a lot about them as well. So our interest there is ongoing. We continue to work with our vendors and with other stakeholders across the business to make sure that communication is getting out there. So think about it. If you see, some type of graphic or any information from the intelligence team, the goal is for them to persuade you. And ultimately, I'm writing products or my team is drafting products. We want people to really evaluate the security posture of our organization. Generally, we're looking at threats to the environment that may not have materialized as of yet. And so we're trying to get out in front and be a proactive organization. Being proactive is very difficult because it requires not just the appropriate content, but it requires political capital, right? Like, it's something that we often overlook. How do we move the needle? How do we get buy-in from the key stakeholders in the organization? And sometimes it's as simple as just in how we can put together those products. How do we make it important to those that are reading it? And quite frankly, how do we ensure that intelligence is actionable? The first step is to make sure it's read. So just starting from scratch, we focus on, the thinking around the focus on design, less about the technical underpinnings of the work that we do. They go hand in hand. So I'm not at all proposing that we put less emphasis on the earlier stages of the intelligence lifecycle. What I'm proposing is that we think very critically about how we do the final stage of the intelligence lifecycle, which is implementation. Part of, I think, my learnings so far have been really that we can have a seat at the board, with the executive committee, if in fact we can hand over deliverables that the CISO can readily take to that caliber of folks. So, going back and just thinking some of the great investigators that, whose shoulders we all stand on. Cliff Stoll, if you aren't familiar with The Cuckoo's Egg, is a highly recommended read. I'm pretty sure that probably at least half of the population here has already read it. But one of the comments he made was that I thought all I had to do was show the data and people would understand it. It doesn't work. You have to tell a story. And at the end of the day, if we aren't storytellers, then what exactly are we doing? Right? And that's the nature, and I think as you get down to the core of what we do, we all have to tell really good stories to compel people to act. Intelligence, in my estimation, has really been about taking data from disparate sources and turning that into stories themselves. It's why we use techniques that are, really prominent in the data science community. It's why we use machine learning. It's why we're using the best of breed of algorithms to really start to make sense of what was once just a deluge of information that we couldn't make decisions with. But again, if we want to have a seat at the table, products must first be read to be actionable. Is anybody in the room, just about show of hands, in cyber threat intelligence? We got some good representation, and there's some people kind of on the tangential parts of it as well. So you know how hard it is in your organizations to make sure your products get read. Just because it leaves the door doesn't imply that the people who intend to read it absolutely do so. And we've taken a couple steps to try to increase our chances. So for those who aren't in intelligence or aren't practitioners of this field, I want to kind of just give you a brief synopsis of the intelligence life cycle. If you talk to anybody who was beside you who raised their hand, you find out pretty quickly we know this through and through. But most of how we know it is because of military doctrine, because of government approaches, and I've been thinking long and hard about how does this apply to private industries. We want to be very thorough. We want to do analysis of competing hypotheses. We want to use all the techniques to ensure that our biases are in check. We want to hire diverse teams, make sure that we're putting forward analysis that that is criticized, is scrutinized by our own teams, and then we'll hold the muster against some of the other folks in the organization. So one of the things I've been thinking about is that the first 4 stages, so starting with planning and direction, collection, processing, and exploitation, and then on to analysis and production. This is kind of the core of what people know. And quite frankly, here, when we discuss tradecraft, this is where you see a lot of documentation. If you want to read anything about intelligence, they're going to talk about these first 4 phases. The dissemination piece is almost treated as if it's trivial, as if it's second nature and will automatically take care of itself. And for those who raise their hand, I'm sure they can attest that this is not absolutely true. Where do you hang your documents? How do you get your documents in front of those customers? There's a black hole that we all know about in our corporate enterprise called an inbox. If it goes there, it literally goes to die. So you can't have impact, again, if people aren't necessarily privy to your team and the work that you do, the caliber and quality of effort that's put forward to put that analysis together. So we got to be very conscientious of the steps we take to make sure our products are making waves in the organization the way that we want them to. And quite frankly, organizations, despite the world getting smaller with globalization, maybe it seems odd that organizations are more segmented than ever. We have, a number of M&As, so we know that most of us in cybersecurity, our ability to keep the lights on is because companies keep buying other companies, and quite frankly, that creates gaps in the network. It creates, opportunities for threat actors to take advantage of a seemingly transition period for a company. And what we found is that, not only does that M&A impact the network connectivity, but it impacts the organizational connectivity as well. And so how do we influence lines of business who've never heard of us, right? We want to believe that we're enterprise service, and we certainly are here to supply the business with whatever their requests for information are. But the reality is everyone is not as susceptible to the idea of intelligence. Certainly, a lot of people will confuse a cyber threat intelligence team with being a newsroom. So if it's in a Wall Street Journal, then the thing is, well, why didn't we report on it first? And, the nature of the beast and the work that we do requires a bit more tenacity in how we approach the challenges ahead. And so the intelligence lifecycle is really an important framework for us. And if you aren't familiar, there's plenty of resources online. I really think that it'll help all security practitioners get a better sense and understanding of level of effort needed to transition data to information and subsequently information to intelligence. Hold on, give me 1 second. 1 second. All right. I want to take you all on a little bit of our design journey. This has been kind of an interesting reprieve from what I think is, we've had a very successful CTI team, but some of our missteps are absolutely going to be for you all's benefit. So starting out, before I came to the organization, we do what's called a quarterly cyber threat landscape report. And all you all probably may be familiar, your organizations probably produce these, but is a very is a take on how threat actors and vulnerabilities in the environment could be an elixir for a successful attack or breach. And so what we did was, when I first came in, this was the cyber threat landscape report that was pushed out. So although this is maybe a little harder to read, that's in part intentional because the content I can't share. But I want you to look at the design elements because that's the concepts here that we want to walk through. So if you notice, you see some color schemes here. One is orange, gray, and white. Everybody's seen the What's in Your Wallet commercials. I'm quite sure nobody's seen our colors as orange, gray, and white. Fair enough. So what happens in Capital One is we have these fiefdoms where teams are, really trying to champion their own personal brands internally. And this kind of creates an issue, particularly when we want to send information up to an executive level audience, right? So number one, being in alignment with the actual brand for the organization is rule number one. So using the same color palettes is a really easy thing to do, but it was something that was a far cry from the behavior, not just of our team, but of all the teams in cybersecurity. You see, we can't hardly see it, but there's a separate logo. There's a lot of people wearing a jersey suggestive of which teams they're part of, and they do so very proudly. But in effect, they're isolating themselves from the greater organization, and I want to encourage everyone to make sure you're in alignment with kind of the brand aesthetics of your teams, your organization. We had a pretty standard executive summary, but what you'll notice is that there's tons of narrative text. So all those blocks just represent all the words and reading that someone will have to do to get a sense of what the threat landscape is for Capital One. As you might imagine, and I'll save myself the trauma on the poll, but this was probably not that effective. Right? There's no way I could send this to the CEO of the organization. There's no way I could send it to the CISO, CIO, and get their buy-in for investment in technologies, for thought leadership on maybe more simulation and exercise and phishing program, training and awareness. There was no way we would want to get them to sit down and give up their time to read a document structured in this way. Fair enough? So what did we do? So we tried something different. We took a step and we said, well, let's, number one, let's get better aligned with the color palette of the organization. Let's use more quantifiable metrics to do call outs, right? I want the big takeaways to be visual aids, if at all possible, to complement the narrative text that was present. You start off kind of just giving an agenda, hey, here are the questions we're seeking to answer. Maybe just give better organization to the document itself. And then just being very clear on what the outlooks are. So at the end of the document, there's these sectionals where we say these are the major takeaways. And quite frankly, if you have one-on-one discussions with an executive and you only got, a couple 30 seconds for an elevator pitch, you better put the most important information up front. And it better be easy to read. And so you see, we took this transition. So I think it's fair to say that we got better, right? But we all know that, better just because it's good doesn't mean it can't have an update. And so we continue to iterate on this. We said, well, what about when this product went out, worked? What did people respond to? Did we get any feedback? And as you imagine, soliciting feedback at an organization of our size is pretty difficult. So, you have, and I shortened this up a bit because there's, obviously a lot more pages, but there's still tons of narrative text, right? And they're still kind of blocked together in a fashion that's hard to get that white space and see the delineation between your lines. And again, it's better because we're using images and it's looking more to the tune of what you see external, right? Like all the security vendors are publishing reports all the time. And that they have, brand teams and marketing teams that are helping piece these things together. We're a shop that's trying to do it all in-house using PowerPoint, right? So we think that was to our disadvantage, but we started really hampering down, really starting to understand design a lot better, and we made another transition. So we went from Q2 2017, before I got there, and then evaluating what we did. This is what we did in Q3 2017, and now we're on to Q4 2017. And this is what we pushed out then. Right? So the product is getting much more mature. And in part, the reason being is because we realized that pictures, really do equate to 1,000 words. I mean, there's so much more we can do in an image than what we can do in writing. And if we go on a word diet, a forced word diet is what I told the team we're doing. So we only are going to write the most important, most critical points, and then where possible, we're going to supplement that with more graphics. We're going to have, very clear demarcations in the product. So you're in this section, we're covering this content, so on and so forth. Much of our work is going to borrow from, the likes of other reporting, Verizon DBIR report, and those of security vendors who are speaking specifically to threats to the financial services industry. Bringing it all in-house and thinking very intentionally about how do I, in 20 minutes, be able to hand over a document that an executive can read through and make some decisions for. So we did this exercise, and it proved immediately fruitful for us because the CISO then made the decision to hand this off to the CEO of Capital One. Right? So a huge win for the team. I mean, imagine the year-end discussions when people say, I authored a product that was read by the CEO of the organization. And so it takes, we were able to do this in 2 short quarters, right? And again, this is not the end of the product, right? So we got another one coming out in March, and we're looking to reiterate. Now, the goal is to get to a point where you just have a standing template, because every time you don't have enough time to go rebuild something new with an entirely different look and feel. So what I'm encouraging you all to do is come up with interesting ways to just templatize your work so that every time people know what to expect. And then, quite frankly, it's easy to piecemeal your product together throughout the quarter versus trying to hand jam a lot of information down to the very end. As you can see, we reused a lot of icons for threat actors. These graphics themselves aren't overly complex at all. You get you an icon here and there, and you lay it out a certain way. Again, you can see our usage of white space. You see we did the 2-column approach, and that kind of borrows from what we see in newspapers. Just the mere fact we start looking at, well, what do people prefer to read in magazines? So we picked some of our favorite magazines, we saw the layout, and we studied it, and we said, well, we should try to do that and see how it takes. And what you get is a much more crisp product. But more importantly, you get a product that people can take action. And that's the ultimate goal of our program, and it's certainly the ultimate goal of our writing. If any of you in here are developers, the worst thing in the world is to build a product or an application that no one uses. For those in the intelligence field, is to write and no one reads. And I felt, we were doing an incredible disservice to all the hard work and analysis that was being put forward by not framing it in a way where people both could read the product and then, again, take action. Yep, all PowerPoint. So we only distribute our products internally, so great point there. So we have a production distribution list that we send via email, but what we do is I have the team on a speaking circuit. So not only are we handing you the product and putting it in your inbox, which is dangerous, but we're also hanging it on our intranet page. We're also working with our leadership to say, look, this is a great opportunity for us to go through a brief to different parts of the business. And as a do-out, you get this product in your hand as well. Yeah, so this is an internal pilot. We do, Capital One has a actual brand team, no question about it. So the brand team is pushing out and forcing people to conform to products that leave Capital One. And what we decided to do is we'll use all of that design aesthetic and just apply it to our products internally. Yep. So we get a bit of an advantage because there's pretty sizable dollars going into making sure that there's an aesthetic and a language that people can use to express themselves or the products that we push out to the community. But on the flip side, we weren't doing it before, and so we're definitely going to do it now. So I think a lot of times when you think about intelligence, there's most organizations most CTI teams are going to have a writing guide, right? If you have multiple people contributing to products, the last thing you want to do is doing your QA have to go back through and get all the dates situated the same way. You want certain nomenclature to be applied across the product, and you want it to sound as if it's from one singular voice. And so most of us have writing guides, but most of us don't have style guides, design guides. And, adding this to the repertoire of your CTI program is not the latest, greatest tool, but it certainly pays dividends. I've personally seen a team of people who generally did not feel as if they had itch for design start to build what I believe to be really nice graphics that garner the attention from other parts of the business as well. So the style guide for us is really, Capital One does have an internal typography that we can use, so we use that. The colors, we were able to find complementary palettes and swatches that made sense for how we communicate. And then, we had a logo that was, everyone used the same logo every single time. Stop, going on Google and doing a screenshot of our own logo and it looks pixelated. It's kind of ridiculous. Investing in icons, right? It sounds kind of silly, but buy icon pack will pay dividends beyond belief. And then lastly, just giving some rules. So think about the fact that you're dictating to people, hey, when you're all the content, the body of it needs to be in area, right? If you want to emphasize something, bold it, right? The pretty standard stuff. When we're doing bullets, we don't use periods. All these things seem very simple, but when you get a product that 8 people have inputs on, and all those things are different, you miss one, it really does impact people's reaction to the product and to the quality of the analysis. So we do that. We don't have a debugger, so to speak, right? The debugger is so in code, you miss your semicolon. The compiler is going to scream at you. But for us, if we miss a semicolon and it's supposed to be there, it just makes us look sloppy. And so we just have to hold ourselves to a very high standard. And in doing so, we can obviously engender trust from people. So I want to make this actionable for people. The goal is not just to show you pretty pictures of things we've done at Capital One and say you should do it too, and then I keep on going about my day. The goal is to say, well, how do you go from doing like very deep textual products to those enhanced by visual design aids? And there's a couple tools that are free of charge. Some of them have nominal costs associated with them that I would definitely recommend. One of which is StockSnap.io. So if you all are looking for high-res photos, this is like the absolute place to go. So they have high-res photos that are copyright-free. Never seen anything like it in my life. If you go on Google and you search for high-res photos and you remove the copyright restrictions, you're not getting anything worthwhile. You're getting flip art at best. And nobody likes flip art. So here, you can go here. They have some beautiful imagery. They have a search feature that allows you to look for, buildings or architecture, whatever it is to kind of enhance maybe the cover page or, to give you the dividers, the sectionals in between your product. Highly recommend it. But the repository is ever growing. There's a number of photographers who absolutely participate regularly and are obviously growing the interest of that community. The other one is for icons. So the Noun Project is probably the single greatest source of icons. Of course, this iconography costs money. In some regards, they do have some free ones there as well. But I strongly recommend you go download a pack and have that in your back pocket to, again, enhance your products. Then lastly, not lastly, but we have rawgraphics.io, rawgraphs.io. So this service is really neat. So you essentially take spreadsheet style data and you can drop it in. You can actually run this locally as well, so you don't have to have fear of sharing out sensitive information. I normally, if there's something in there, I'm not really big on labels or my axes and things of that nature. There's sometimes why I want to keep it as clean as possible, and I'd rather add those labels when I get the graphic into PowerPoint versus doing it and I can't perform it to my liking. So with rawgraphs.io, you can do a copy of a spreadsheet, and they have really advanced graphic capabilities, and this is completely free of charge. So I highly recommend it just to add another element. So most of us are doing our graphs in Excel at best. And if that's the case, we all know there's web-based languages. D3 JavaScript library allows for you to do some amazing graphics, but that takes a certain there's a learning curve to climb if you're going to start developing in that realm. So this is already built on D3, the same graphics library that allows for you to do essentially anything and everything you want to. But what I do is I draw inspiration from data journalism. So if you look in the newspaper now, there's a lot more stories being told with the data made very accessible to you. But what I recognize is that even though like New York Times is written at a certain grade level to attract layman readers, what I found is they don't necessarily apply the same rigor to their graphics because most people can make sense out of numbers and graphics if laid out appropriately. Look at the MLB section as a great example. Nobody, people who don't know baseball seemingly can look at that part of the paper and get it. And so there's something that they're doing there, something about graphics and design itself that allow for us to communicate in ways that are universal. So really trying to champion that here in cyber threat intelligence particularly. Some other tools. So a big part of design, and there's a book called Still Like an Artist. And I say that wholeheartedly. So one of the things we need to think about is like, where do we draw inspiration? If you go to dribble.com, behance.net, these are essentially catalogs, portfolios of designers sharing their work, sharing their design aesthetics, sharing some cues that I think we could readily leverage to apply to the products that we're pushing out in a cyber threat intelligence world. And really, this is interesting because all of us read magazines, all of us pick up the newspaper from time to time. We're all exposed to design all around us. And what I challenge you all to do is just to open your eyes to it. Be susceptible to it. Take it in and say, oh, I like the way they laid that out. I could recreate that. And so you're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. And I think that that's been one of the fallacies about how do we go about doing this work effectively is that, oh, well, I wasn't trained as a designer, nor was I. I'm a computer scientist, and I study information security. I know cyber. Design has been a part of, me finding unique ways to make our work matter that much more. So look for these are two great sites where you can type in what you're trying to do, and you might get some hits, but just look at what other people do and just make that a part of your pattern. It'll definitely start to ingrain itself in the way you think, and you'll be able to very easily apply these lessons to the products that you're creating. Then there's the last one is material.io. And the reason this is a Google product, of course, free of charge as well. But another thing, most of us have no idea what colors go well together. I mean, you all dress nice today, but for the purposes of a product, it's hard to say. I don't know anything about the patent on colors. I'm not that involved in it. So what I need is a tool that's going to help me make sense of what color palettes are complementary. And so someone has already done that hard work for us, and if we take advantage of it, they'll give us the RGB codes, and we can obviously get that in PowerPoint and apply that across our presentations. And then lastly, one of the things I wanted to show you all in PowerPoint, and I'm not going to make any assumptions here, right? Like, so if somebody knows this already, by all means, forgive me. But in PowerPoint, how many of you all are familiar with InDesign? So very few people know InDesign. So that means that that means you don't have it installed on your machines, and it means that what you do have is PowerPoint. And so one of the things I found out in PowerPoint, and is that those graphics you saw before were all done in PowerPoint. Let's be clear. Everything we've designed out of the CTI program has been done in PowerPoint. So there's no real magic here. But PowerPoint, actually, if you go to design, slide size, you can, where it says in the left-hand side, it says slide size 4, and there's a drop-down button. You can actually choose to create a slide the same size as a piece of paper, standard sheet of paper, 8.5 by 11. And then you get the same functionality you have with InDesign, where you can, because everybody's trying moving stuff, images around, and Word is the worst thing ever. It's terrible. And so what you can do is create a master slide that says, these are the barriers for my columns, and make sure that's consistent all the way throughout the product. You can make sure the alignment is perfected. But you can set this up exactly as it would be an 8.5 by 11 sheet. And so now the whole world opens up to you. All the different graphics that you wanted to get into your Word document that you couldn't figure out, the anchor, or, do I do the text above it? Do I do the text squared? Or it's the worst thing ever. And it's very convoluted. It's hard to figure out, despite years of computer science training. So I recommend using PowerPoint, transitioning over, getting some good, imagery. And again, the biggest thing is margins. You have to be respectful of margins, because if you start dipping down below a certain part of the page, if you start going over a certain width, if you don't draw that box first, you'll be in a world of hurt later, because that, again, will make your product look sloppy and less professional, and then in turn will make people less receptive to the analysis that you've done. So I want to talk a little bit about, designing a new destiny, right? So we talked a little bit about our design journey. I've showed you some examples or some ways in which you can harness tools that are freely available to you on the internet or at nominal cost to you on the internet to enhance what you're doing in your organizations. And so one way in which we're gauging the success and maturity of our program, of course, is who is interested in our products, right? We want to make sure that people are reading. But we've started to dabble in design in ways that probably traditional CTI programs aren't. And what that means is that we said, and made a conscious effort that our brand as a team and as a program is reinforced by good design. So we've not only applied this to the cyber threat landscape product, but we've applied this across the entire product catalog. We try to remain consistent. So we've thought about ways in which we present status reports in complete dashboard style. I've had people I've sent PowerPoint templates to, and they started clicking on things because they thought it were real buttons. But imagine handing this over to a web designer, right? It's the best technical requirements product on the planet, right? They don't have to think at all about what you want. It's right there for the taking. Also thinking about, our early bird product. This is a daily news summary that we send out every morning. It goes to hundreds of people across the enterprise. Again, if we make mistakes here, there's a lot more visibility on a product that doesn't require that much rigor, right? So we have to be, conscientious of these things such that we're not making errors and then subsequently hurting our brand in the process. We think a lot about timelines and data points and graphics and charts, and we continue to do that in every product that we push out, and we are going to continue to think about how do we create a more uniform look across that product catalog. So again, we're not reinventing the wheel each time. There's something new that we want to discuss. So, I think in my experience, one of the key takeaways for me is that in corporate organizations, a book will absolutely be judged by its cover. Right? This is not, you don't get the benefit of the doubt when people are trying to make determinations on how or what they give their attention to. So we have a responsibility in the cybersecurity community to make it easy for them to decide to give their time and attention to us. If we're saying that humans are the weakest link in cybersecurity, they're also, it's also clear to say that the onus is on us to make it important to them. And we aren't going to make it any more important by just telling them how terrible they are. We have to start to apply elements of design to get those ideas across. So we have to fiercely compete for a reader's attention. And just like here at a talk, the speaker has a responsibility to make it worth your while. Any books that you pick up from your favorite authors, you have an expectation that they thought about you when drafting what they wrote. That they were considerate of the fact that you're sacrificing something. You could be doing anything else right now. You're here and you're sitting in a chair attentively, and so the onus is on me right now to make this worthwhile. Same for us as intelligence analysts. So we started to foray into some other spaces. So not only have we decided to design our products and what we author, we've also decided that we should be designing the channels and mediums through which people can access our products. So we've gotten to the business of developing even wireframes that really allow for this one particularly thinking about an executive leader saying, well, how could they very quickly get access to information across the enterprise that's relevant to them, and that will subsequently allow for them to make decisions with speed. Because, at the end of the day, intelligence has to be timely, it has to be accurate, it has to be relevant, right? And so the timely piece here is quite critical, and I want to make sure that we lay things out in a fashion that allow for them to make decisions. So one of the things we did, we used icons to support our efforts, and we try to do so a bit sparingly, but we're thoughtful about how icons can draw attention for a particular user of the system. We chose color palettes that were complementary and consistent with what people have seen from us before. The layout, of course, is a respecter of white space. We want to continue to do that. We are not just dictating content. We're determining delivery channels as well. And this is a new world for us. We don't really know how this will be received, but again, leaning on those design principles, those 6 design principles we talked about in the beginning, there is a likelihood that this will continue to gain steam. And then, we're going to use call outs. So, I always want our executive leadership to know what the threat level is. right? I mean, at first blush, even if you had seconds before you got to a meeting, I want them to be able to very quickly identify, hey, this is where we stand on items that are most pressing to the organization. So we push this out, and I imagine it's going to be very successful, given the fact that we've approached this in the same manner that we've done our products as well. So with that, I'm going to close, and I put some contact information, obviously, on Twitter and LinkedIn. The ask is obviously, feel free to reach out and keep in touch. But, the goal is for you just to be aware of all the design around you. The chairs that you're sitting in, someone decided to make the chairs that way. And until you appreciate that all these decisions are made by other human beings, and that we too have a hand to play in making sure that we're designing for the world around us and for people whose interests we have at heart, this will all fall on deaf ears. So continue to look around, be appreciative of the design around you, and I think that'll start to manifest in the intelligence products that we push out as well. Any questions? Yes. Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Yep. 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 Yeah, it's hard to know like what is considered done, right? I mean, everything changes, right? But the goal is that your products are allowing for you to get a better read on your readers, right? Like I'm trying to gauge interest, and so these small changes are in itself tests as well. And so you can start off with smaller groups. You can do A/B testing, so to speak. See if you push out two products in two different formats, which ones are likely to, attract a greater readership. But I would say that, we are on the next frontier in our journey, but it doesn't mean that we're settling for what we've done so far. So maybe this is just going to happen in perpetuity. But inevitably, I think we're going to get to a point where the development of these new templates is becoming more like muscle memory. So as a team kind of does this over and over again, it's getting a lot easier for us to conjure up new ideas. And of course, we're, again, being sensitive to the world around us. And so I think we're going to land on something where we can say, okay, this is good, this is consistent across the board, and this has buy-in from all our stakeholders. And we'll just continuously, this doesn't come at the expense of focusing on the content itself, right? Like you cannot erode that by saying, well, I'm just working on making this look pretty. You have to have good content there as well. Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I mean, there's always that chance, right? Like, I mean, but people give more credence because it's coming from an internal team, right? Like, so I'm less concerned about that because we're always going to contextualize when another entity external to Capital One can't do that. So that part, I think we're kind of safe, but we are always, being very thoughtful about what the time commitment and energy and effort required to build out these products in this manner. And when we find them to start to undercut at the analysis itself, then that's gone too far. Yep. Yeah. Yeah, so one thing you can't do is you can't do your test if all you're doing is sending these products out via email. There's no feedback loop then, right? I mean, so we attach a survey as well, and we beg people to give us, that feedback, and of course, nothing comes back. But what we found is that if we hang products on our intranet page, that page has analytics behind it, and we use that to kind of make some. Now, we're not doing like the real A/B testing where I can see where people's eyes are going. It's not that advanced by no stretch, but just by visits alone, tell us a little bit about what's working in the product versus what's not. Yep. Anybody else? Cool. I'll be around, so if anybody wants to chat.